Dublin and Killarney are two of the most popular spots to visit in Ireland, and today I'm going to share what you can see and do between those two spots. Today on the podcast, I wanted to talk about probably one of the most popular point-to-point trips in Ireland, and that is Dublin to Killarney. This is a route that is taken by so many people, and there are two obvious choices when you're traveling from Dublin to Killarney. Both follow a main motorway for the most part. Both are approximately 4 hours, possibly a little bit more depending on traffic, if you drive direct between the two locations. But unless you're in a hurry to get from point A to point B, you're going to stop and do a little bit of touring. When you're ready to start planning your Ireland vacation, grab some inspiration from my free itineraries at irelandfamilyvacations.com/plan. Each one includes places to visit, things to do, and plenty of helpful advice, like attraction and lodging recommendations, car rental tips, and money-saving ideas to make the most of your trip. Check them out and download yours today at irelandfamilyvacations.com/plan, PLAN. So when you're traveling from Dublin to Killarney, the two routes that you're going to see, especially if you're utilizing mapping software like Google Maps, Waze, or Apple Maps, you're going to see the M7, the Motorway 7, that will go through Limerick and then drop south. And you're going to see the M8 or Motorway 8 that takes you down through Tipperary. Like I said, both routes are around 4 hours. The Limerick route is a little bit less, but that is only if you drive direct. It's a very long, dull drive if you drive direct. So my recommendation is always to stop and do some touring. You're going through some very beautiful country, especially if you're going through Tipperary. That's my preferred route when I make that drive. But I'm going to kind of talk about the things that you can see along both routes, and you can make your decision based on that. So if you're driving the M7 via Limerick, if you have absolutely no rush that day, if you don't need to get to Killarney by earlier mid-afternoon, I really think the Irish National Stud is a terrific place to stop and spend a couple of hours. 2 or 3 hours usually is what you can expect to spend there. Unless you really love horses, you might be there longer. This is a public stud in Ireland. So many famous racehorses are trained and run there at the National Stud and on the Curragh of Kildare that it sits upon. So if you love horses, it's a great stop. If you love gardens, it's also a great stop. There are 2 gardens at the National Stud. Probably the most well-known is the Japanese garden, and it's absolutely stunning. You walk, it's the life of man, so it kind of takes you through, guides you through life with all the choices. There's, you can take this path or go this way, and, take the easy route or the more difficult route. But it's a fabulous, fabulous Japanese garden. There's also a beautiful Irish garden on the grounds as well. So the Irish National Stud for at least 2 hours, probably closer to 3 if you are not in a rush. Another spot just off the M7 near Portlaoise is the Rock of Dunamase. This is one of my very favorite spots in all of Ireland. It is a castle ruin that sits upon a rock, and the views from it on a nice day, you can see all the counties surrounding for miles and miles. And then, at the risk of getting a little woo-woo here, it's just a powerful spot. You can, the castle was built up there for a reason. It obviously helped to defend it, but it was also a really powerful place. And I think you can feel that when you arrive at it. It's just really a stupendous spot to stop. It's an open site. There is no visitor center. There is no tickets, and there's nobody around. So be very careful. But it's a stunning, stunning ruin. Going on along the M7 to Limerick, you are going to find King John's Castle within the city. This is a beautiful Norman castle. It sits on the river, and it really was a stronghold for that part of the country. It is a great tour. They've done a lot of updates. It's very interactive, and it would be about a 90-minute to 2-hour visit there at King John's Castle. And then just south of Limerick, you would choose either Loch Gur, which is the home of the largest stone circle in Ireland, is right there at Loch Gur, along with some beautiful megalithic and Bronze Age history. Or you would go over to Adair, which many have called the prettiest village in Ireland. So one way or the other, you could do both. A little bit of backtracking to do that, but always possible. So that would be your route via Limerick on the M7. So the National Stud, if you have the time, Rock of Dunamase, King John's Castle, again, if you have the time, and either Loch Gur or Adair. Are you ready to hit the road in Ireland? When it's time to compare car rental prices, check out Irish Car Rentals, my top pick for great vehicles and outstanding customer service. Plus, I have a special treat for you, an exclusive 10% discount when you book using link IrelandFamilyVacations.com/ICR. Start your journey the smart way, save more, and explore more with Irish Car Rentals. Now, following the M8 through Tipperary, you are going to have a very full day with 3 stops. The first being the Rock of Dunamase. Now, obviously, you could put the National Stud in this day, but I almost think it makes it a little too long just because of the stops following. So you've got the Rock of Dunamase and then the Rock of Cashel. So the Rock of Dunamase and the Rock of Cashel are actually very similar, but Dunamase is a complete ruin and Cashel has restoration to it. So it's, still a amazingly beautiful castle that sits upon a very large rocky outcropping in Tipperary, but where Dunamase is a complete ruin, the Rock of Cashel, you still have walls, you have a beautiful cemetery surrounding it because it went from being a castle to being part of the church. You have some beautiful sarcophagus and things like that there. The St. Patrick's Cross, this is where St. Patrick actually taught the Trinity to one of the kings of Munster. And so it's really a very elaborate and interesting site. There's also a wonderful walk from the Rock of Cashel down to Hoare Abbey that, so Hoare Abbey sits kind of beneath the rock, and that can make a really nice stop too. So at the Rock of Cashel, you're looking at a minimum of 90 minutes, but I think 2 to 2.5 hours is actually a more realistic amount of time spent at the Rock of Cashel, especially if you take advantage of one of their guided tours. They do a very nice guided tour that is included with your entry fee there. And then following the Rock of Cashel, you have 2 options. Again, this is kind of an either or. You can go to Cahir Castle, which is the second largest Norman castle in Ireland. My favorite Norman castle to visit in Ireland, because you can literally go from the dungeon up to the top of a tower, and you really feel like you have access to this entire castle. It is somewhat restored, so it's in very, very nice condition to explore. And again, they do a terrific guided tour there. One of my favorite things about Cahir Castle is that it sits on an island in the river. And behind the castle, in the parkland, it's a perfect place for a picnic. There's a spot right across the street from there. I think it's called the River House, that they do a lovely sandwich. They'll make them up there for you, or you could even sit down and eat there. But I like to get sandwiches and go back over and do a picnic behind the castle. I think that that's a really nice way to relax and spend a bit of the afternoon. But if Blarney Castle and Gardens are on your list, you could skip Cahir Castle and go to Blarney and spend a few hours there. I think Blarney needs 2.5 hours at a minimum because the grounds are so extensive. And depending on when you visit, and if you want to climb up the castle to the stone and bend backwards and kiss it, that can take a while. People do line up and queue for that. So it can take, on a busy day, 45 minutes to get to the top of that castle. So, and then from either one of those castles, then you'd go on to Killarney. So that is actually a full day. You can expect that that route down the M8 through Tipperary to Killarney to take at least 6.5 to 7 hours, if not a little bit longer. Now, two stops that I see kind of trying to be fit in to a Dublin to Killarney trip are Kilkenny and Wicklow. And I hear the question a lot of, can I visit Kilkenny? Should I visit Glendalough as I travel between Dublin and Killarney? And technically you can. I'm going to say, technically, yes, you can. Wicklow is a little harder because if you visit Powers Court and Glendalough, then you're cutting kind of through Tipperary again, but you're not going to have the time to visit the Rock of Cashel or Care Castle as you go through there, because you will have spent a minimum of 5 to 6 hours in Wicklow. So I think Wicklow is a much better day trip from Dublin, or done on its own. So you go down to Wicklow, you spend the day there, and then you would go on. Regarding Kilkenny, I think that one of the biggest mistakes people make is trying to fit in the city in too short of a time. Now, there are a lot of tours that do this. They will spend 2 hours in the city of Kilkenny. And that is really enough time to visit Kilkenny Castle, maybe grab a bite of lunch and walk the medieval mile, maybe pop through the butter slip. But it's not giving you a lot of time to take in the medieval city. And I think that the city deserves a full day on its own, because there really is just quite a lot to see, do, and experience there in Kilkenny. So can you visit Kilkenny on your way down to Killarney? Yes, you can. Should you do it? It really depends on how much do you want to see and do in the city. So what I would say is look at what's available in Kilkenny City and think about, what things do I want to experience while I'm there. And if it's more than 2 things, then you need to spend a little bit more time in Kilkenny, because once you're done with those 2 things, you're going to have found out about 3 or 4 more that you will wish you had time for. Okay? So that is my advice on the Dublin to Killarney route. I hope it was helpful for you as you make your plans for your Ireland vacation. If you know someone else who is dreaming of Ireland, be sure to share this podcast with them. You'll find handy sharing links in your favorite podcast player, and you can always just send them to irelandfamilyvacations.com/podcasts. If you have questions or comments, you can always email me, Jody, Jody, at irelandfamilyvacations.com. As always, thank you so much for listening, and until next time, slán go fóill.